Hello everyone and welcome to Kiki Crochet. In this video tutorial we are going to learn how to crochet step by step the puff stitch, which is a very beautiful and simple stitch to work. The rule for this stitch is multiples of 2, so any even number of chains will do, and the repeating rows are row 2 and row 3. Now this stitch is suitable for almost all projects. You can work cows, scarves, infinity scarves, you can work hats, you can even use it on bags and purses. It will look really nice. You can make cardigans, whatever you like with this stitch, you can work it. But it gives a very nice and cozy feeling, very warm result when you crochet with bulky size yarns, like size 5 yarn. It will look very nice. This is a size 5 bulky yarn. Look how nice and puffy it is. Okay, now once we see how to work the stitch and how to work the repeating rows and everything, in the end I'm going to show you how, by using your gauge, you can calculate the number of chains and rows needed to work a bigger project. So let's see how to start. I have started with my chains. I have an even number of stitches, an even number of chains. So whatever project you want to start, you want your chains to be an even number. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever number you need, okay? Just even number. And we are going to start a row with single crochet, and this is how we're gonna go. A row of single crochet, a row of the puff stitch, single crochet, puff stitch, and this will give a nice result on our project. So when we crochet with single crochet, out of the total chains in row 1, I'm going to have one less stitch. So I have 16 chains. In row 1, I'm going to have a total of 15 single crochet. So skip the first chain, put your hook in the second one, and work one single crochet. Next stitch, 2, next one, 3, next one, 4, and keep crocheting up until the end for a total of 15 single crochet. I have completed crocheting my 15 single crochet. Now we're going to start row number 2, which is the first row of repetitions. And every time you are in the row where you're going to crochet the puff stitch, we always start and finish in the same exact way as we are going to do in this row. So always we're going to start with 2 chains every time we are on the second row, on the first row of repetitions, okay? Turn your work and yarn over once. Now starting from the first stitch, I'm going to start creating the puff stitch. So yarn over once, put your hook in the first stitch of the row, take the yarn, pull it through the stitch, and extend the loop up until the height of the loop that you have on your crochet hook. Okay, yarn over once, and for a second time put your hook in the same stitch, take the yarn, pull through the stitch, and extend the loop to have the same height as the other ones. Yarn over once, put your hook in the same stitch for the third and last time, take the yarn, extend the loop to have the same height as the other ones. Now I have worked a total of 3 times in the same stitch, and I have 7 loops on my hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are always going to have 7 loops on our hook when we work the puff stitch. Now take the yarn and pull it carefully through all of the 7 loops and chain 1 to secure. Okay, so this was our first puff stitch. Now yarn over once, skip the next stitch, and put your hook in the second one. So we always skip a stitch and we always put our hook in the second one. Okay, and start creating the puff stitch. So put your hook in the second stitch for the first time, take the yarn and extend the loop to have the same length as the loop on your hook. Grab the yarn, put your hook in the same stitch for the second time, grab the yarn, extend, yarn over once, put your hook in the same stitch for the third and last time, take the yarn and extend. we have a total of 7 loops. Take the yarn, pull through all of the 7 loops and chain 1 to secure. So we have 2 puff stitches so far. Okay, yarn over once, skip the next stitch, put your hook in the second one. For the first time, okay, grab the yarn, pull through the stitch and extend. Yarn over once, put your hook in the same stitch for the second time, take the yarn and extend. Yarn over once, put your hook in the same stitch for the third and last time, take the yarn and extend. Again, we have 7 loops on our hook. Take the yarn, pull through all of the 7 loops and chain 1 to secure. So we have 3 puff stitches and look how nice our stitch looks. Okay, now I'm going to finish the row off camera. Always crochet in every second stitch up until the end. The last stitch is going to be a puff stitch. Okay, and always take your hook 3 times in the same stitch. We have 7 loops. Take the yarn through all of the loops and then chain 1 to secure. Once I finish, I'm going to turn my video back on. I have completed crocheting row 2 with a total of 8 puff stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we're going to start row number 3, which is the second and last row of repetitions, and throughout the project we are always going to be repeating row 2 and row 3. Now after you have worked the chain to secure the last puff stitch, we are going to chain 1 to turn our work. Okay, now I have a total of 8 puff stitches, but I need to bring back my 15 single crochet that I had in row 1. In order to do that, because we were always skipping a stitch to work the next puff stitch, we always going to be working on top of the puff stitch right here in the chain that I work to secure the loops, and always a single crochet between the 2 puff stitches. Okay, so let's start by working the first single crochet on top of the first puff stitch right in here where I work the chain to secure. Okay, 1. Now between the 2 puff stitches, 2 on top of the puff stitch right here in the chain, 3 between the 2 stitches, 4 on top of the puff stitch, 5 between the 2 stitches, 6 on top of the puff stitch, 7 between the 2 puff stitches, 8 on top of the puff stitch, 9 between the 2 stitches, 10 on top of the puff stitch, 11 between the 2 stitches, 12 on top of the puff stitch, 13 between the 2 stitches, 14 and on top of my last puff stitch right in here in the chain, 15. So I brought back my 15 single crochet. Now we're going to start repeating the 2 rows. Okay, so we're going to do the repetitions of row number 2. So we are going to start by chaining 2, turn our work, and starting from the first stitch I'm going to work my first puff stitch. So I'm going to put my hook in the same stitch for a total of 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Take the yarn, pull through all of the 7 loops and chain 1 to secure. So this is my first out of the 8 puff stitches for this row. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work a few more rows off camera by repeating row 2 and row 3 just to see how a bigger project will look, and in the end, as we have done in other stitches, we are going to see by using our gauge how to calculate the total number of stitches and rows that we would need for a bigger project. I completed working a few extra rows off camera, and look what a beautiful result. Such a simple stitch, only repeating 2 rows, and look how beautiful it looks. It's cozy, it's puffy, it's just right for your winter projects. I haven't worked a puff stitch, tell you the truth, for a few years now, and I have forgotten how beautiful this stitch could be. Okay, it's great for cows, great for beanies. It will look very, very nice in this stitch. Okay, so I have worked now, it's a total of 11 rows. First row with single crochet, second the puff stitch, third with a single crochet, fourth with a puff stitch, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The last row is the row of is row number 3, the second row repetition. Okay, and whatever project that you work, we do want the last row to be the row of single crochet. So we always repeat rows 2 and 3, the puff stitch and the single crochet. Now, whatever project that you're working, chain 1, cut the yarn and fasten off to finish off your project. And now we're going to see, by using our gauge, by using the small sample that we just worked, how can we calculate the number of chains needed and total rows for a bigger project. So let's see how to do that. Okay, now so let's calculate by using our gauge, by using our little sample over here, the total number of chains and rows that we're going to need to start our project with. And by doing this, we will save our time. We will save time from frogging bigger projects. Okay, it's easier to frog a few rows and a few stitches than having to frog a whole project and start from scratch again. So what's very important to write down always before you start calculating is your stitch, the rule, which is multiples of 2, so any even number of chains, and the repeating rows, which is row 2 and row 3 of my project. Also, it's important to write down the yarn and the crochet hook that you used, just so you want to refer back to your gauge to see what yarn and crochet hook you used, so you can use the same, so you don't have to work a new gauge and do all the equations from scratch. Okay, now let's say we want to work a blanket which is 30 inches by 30 inches. Now, in order to calculate the total number of chains to start with, this means that we need the width of the project. I'm going to multiply the number of stitches that I had in my gauge, in this case 15 stitches, times the inches for the width that I need for my project. In this case 30 inches, and I'm going to divide that number by the width of the gauge, in this case 4 inches. And the reason that I say in this case is that because sometimes you will not have exactly 4 inches in your sample, in your gauge. And if this would be 3.5 inches or 3.7 inches width, I want you to write down the exact width of your sample, because if this were 3.8 inches wide and I wrote down 4, okay, in the end, those 0.2 inches that I missed for each time that I was repeating the gauge over here in my bigger project, I would have a narrower project that I would need in the end. So it's very important to write down exactly the width of your sample. So let's start. I need the number of stitches in my gauge. Okay, so I started with 15 stitches times the inches that I need for the width, in this case 30. And I'm going to divide that number by the width of my gauge, in this case 4. So 15 times 30 is 450 divided by 4. And this equals 112.5. So this 112.5 is the number of chains that I need to start with. But I can't have 112.5 chains to start with. So now I need to refer back to my rule, and my rule states that I need a multiple of 2. So any even number of chains to start with. So I will have to either go back to 112 or go up to 113. But 112 is the one that's an even number of chains to start with, okay? So I'm going to need 112 chains to start my blanket in order to get 30 inches width. And from these 112 chains, in all of my rows, I'm going to have 111 stitches. And if my calculations are correct, in the rows of the puff stitch, you would have 55 puffs. Okay, so it's very important to understand your gauge, okay, your rule, in order to know the correct number of chains to start with. Now, a very common mistake that I see a lot of people do, and you send me messages that I started with the same number of chains as you, but my project came out smaller. Please understand that when I crochet a project with this yarn and the 5mm crochet hook, if I use a thinner yarn and a smaller crochet hook, I cannot use the same gauge. The stitches will be different. So if I have a thinner yarn and a smaller crochet hook and I use this gauge over here, my sample will be shorter and narrower. So you need to do a new sample from the beginning. Okay, and this will help you. You can go ahead and use from your leftover yarn that you have. Take yarn and crochet with different number of crochet hooks. Okay, work a few rows with 10 single crochet and compare the width that your projects and the total height that your project have, that your samples. You will see that they are different. So please, when I work a project with this yarn and this crochet hook, I cannot know with what yarn or crochet hook you are going to use. So either you're going to use the same or similar yarn, similar weight yarn, in order to get the same size as I am, or you will have to calculate, make your own sample and adjust to the size of your project. Okay, so this is very, very important, because many people think that if you take any yarn and any crochet hook, you would come up with the same sample. So this is wrong. Okay, if this would be the case, we would have different sizes of yarn and only one crochet hook, if this would be the case. Okay, so please understand this in order to help you come up with your samples and calculate easier the stitches that you would need for a bigger project. So sorry that I'm talking a lot, but this is a common mistake that many people do, and they come up with wrong projects. So now let's see how to calculate the total number of rows that we need for our bigger project. In this case, I'm going to need the number of rows in my gauge, where I worked 11 rows times the inches that I need for the length, in this case 30. And I'm going to divide that number by the length of my gauge, in this case 4 inches. Okay, so let's start calculating the number of rows that I had in my gauge. So 11 rows times the inches that I need for my length times 30. And I'm going to divide that number by the length of my gauge. So I'm going to divide it by 4. So 11 times 30 is 330 divided by 4. And the result is 82.5. Now this 82.5 is the total rows that I need for my blanket to reach 30 inches. Now I can have 82.5 rows So I will either need 82 or 83. Now I'm going to go back to my repeating rows, and right here it says that I repeat rows 2 and row 3. Because row 3 is the last row that I'm repeating, and this is an odd number of row. This means that in the end I'm going to need an odd number of rows to have a complete project, okay, to finish my project with. What this means is that if I would stop here, I would have 3 rows. If I would stop here, I would have 5 rows. If I would stop in this row of single crochet, I would have 7, 9, 11, and so on. So every time you work your row of single crochet, you will always have an odd number of rows. So this means that I'm going to work a total of 83 rows in my project in order to have my 30-inch length. So I'm going to start with 112 chains, and I'm going to work 83 rows to have a blanket of 30 inches by 30 inches. Okay, and this is an easy way to calculate by using your sample, by using your gauge, how to calculate a bigger project. So this is our puff stitch. This is our measurements. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and if you like the video, please press like and leave a comment with your opinions if you liked it or not. Okay, thanks again. Bye bye.